For those who don't know, the Power 9 is a set of 9 cards that were printed in Magic the Gathering's early core sets. The Power 9 are considered to be among the most powerful cards in the game still to this day. So in this video we wanted to go over our picks for Flesh and Blood's Power 9. We chose to stay away from the banned cards for now, but may return to make a list with banned cards included if this gets enough love. But real quickly before we get into this video, we just want to thank FABDB for sponsoring us. As many of you already know, we are huge fans of brewing up some spicy decks with unorthodox cards, and that's all thanks to the card database here on FABDB. We use the search feature to easily find every single playable card for a hero, and often look for the underplayed cards and try to see if we can break them. So if you're also a huge fan of brewing up the most jank decks possible, then check out FABDB. But now let's get back to this vid. So now to start off the list at number 9, we have Snatch. Snatch comes in all 3 colors and is a 0-cost generic attack action. So red Snatch attacks for 4, blocks for 2, with the effect, when Snatch hits, draw a card. But real quickly before we go over how powerful Snatch is, we should first go over the best possible stat line for a 0-cost attack, which is Wounding Blow. Wounding Blow has almost the same stats and cost as Snatch, but trades a single block for the powerful on-hit draw effect. The best way to value a drawn card is simply putting the value of a card at 3, and why 3? It's most likely either the block or attack value of a single card on average in Flesh and Blood. So using that math, we're now trading off 1 value of block to instead gain 3 points of value from a drawn card minimum, and that's only if it hits. Flesh and Blood players today understand the power of drawing cards, inclining them to block out the Snatch, which is conveniently at a breakpoint of 4 power. The highest block value a non-reaction card is able to have is only 3, meaning if the opponent doesn't have a defense reaction in hand, Snatch will take 2 cards from the opponent in order to block it out. And now remember how we valued a card at 3? Well, now this 0-cost attack just gave us 6 points of value without it even hitting, resulting in a quite simple yet extremely effective way to accrue card advantage throughout the game. To round out reasoning for Snatch on how it edged its way into number 9 on our list, simply because of the guaranteed relevancy this card will continue to have in Flesh and Blood in both aggro and mid-range decks for the future. Now coming in at number 8 is Sink Below. Sink comes in all 3 colors just like Snatch, but we'll mostly be referring to the red version of Sink. So Sink Below is a red 0-cost generic defense reaction with 4 block, and the effect, you may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. If you do, draw a card. Now for the newer and the non-fab players here, I'll quickly explain what a defense reaction is. In Flesh and Blood, there's an extra step during combat when a player declares an attack and passes priority for the defending player to declare blocks, and when that player decides to pass the priority back, that is when the reaction step begins. In this step, both players have the opportunity to play and activate reaction cards, instant cards, and abilities to potentially change the outcome of the attack. Defense reactions also bypass a golden rule in Flesh and Blood, that being players are not able to block using cards from their arsenal. So now that we've explained defense reactions, let's get into Sink Below specifically. So again, comparing to Snatch specifically, if Snatch were allowed to hit, it would deal 4 damage plus gain another 3 from the effect of drawing a card, theoretically putting it at 7 points. But now if we're able to block it out cleanly with a Sink Below in that situation is theoretically gaining 7 points of value, simply because it's able to single-handedly block out a card like Snatch. And then when you start to realize and think of Sink Below as a 0-cost 7 value, this is when you start to realize just how powerful this card is able to be. And that's just to explain the block value. Sink Below also has an effect of placing a card on the bottom of your deck, and if you do, draw a card. So this just allows players to, on top of gaining plus 7 points of value for 1 card, but now also even allowing players to filter cards in their hand in order to maximize their offensive pressure that turn cycle as well. This is when Sink Below can be recognized as both an offensive and defensive card. And then on top of all of that, Sink Below has one of the highest meta percentage showing of any card in Flesh and Blood today, as this card is included in both aggro and control strategies, either in the main deck or the sideboard, simply just because of how extremely above rate this card can potentially be, and that's why it came in at number 8 on our list. Now next up on the list, coming in at number 7, we have Enlightened Strike. Enlightened Strike is a red 0-cost generic attack action with 5 power and 3 block. Each strike also has the effect, as an additional cost to play Enlightened Strike, put a card from your hand to the bottom of your deck, then choose one. Draw a card, Enlightened Strike gains plus 2 power, Enlightened Strike gains go again. Now, for any veteran Flesh and Blood player, you would understand just how powerful this attack action is. As a majestic rarity generic printed in the first set of Flesh and Blood ever, Enlightened Strike remains as one of the most powerful attack actions in the game today. This is because its completely unrivaled versatility versatility as an attack action, with the player being able to choose 3 different powerful modes. If the player is looking to just push damage, give Enlightened Strike +2 power. If you're looking to go wide with extra attacks this turn, give Enlightened Strike go again. Or if you're just looking to end the chain off with Enlightened Strike, but you also want to get a card into your arsenal for the turn, you can choose draw a card. This makes all 3 modes of E-Strike relevant every game, no matter the matchup. Also, when you keep in mind the attack value of E-Strike at 5, then plus the value by the modes chosen, +2 power being 2 value, go again 2 value as well, and draw a card just like Snatch as being a +3, you've now gained 7 value minimum for this attack off of 2 cards, which is already by itself above rate. Then on top of all of that, placing a card to the bottom of your deck is actually better than it costing resources to play, since if you place a red card to the bottom, that essentially means you just played out an extremely powerful attack action for only 1 resource, on top of being able to hide your pitch stack from your opponent. And then if none of that was enough to make this card powerful enough, E-Strike also has 3 block, which again is the highest block value possible for non-reaction cards in Flesh and Blood, making this not only a monster attack on offense, but also an extremely reliable card for defense, just adding more reasonings into our belief that this card is the most versatile attack action in Flesh and Blood, and that's why it landed in at number 7. Now, to follow up on E-Strike, coming in at number 6 is Command and Conquer. Command and Conquer is a red 2-cost generic attack action with 6 power and 3 block. With the effect, defense reactions can't be played on Command and Conquer's chain link, and if Command and Conquer hits a hero, destroy all cards in their arsenal. So once again, any experienced Flesh and Blood player would understand that Command and Conquer is probably up there in the conversation of one of the most powerful attack actions in the game. To explain, let's again compare it to the highest stat line generic attack for the same cost, Brutal Assault, which is a 2-cost 6 power attack with 3 block. Now let's look at Command and Conquer. Oh, it has the same stats, but actually has an extra effect. Oh wait, no, it actually has 2 extra effects. So whereas Snatch at least traded off 1 block for its added value in the draw card effect, CNC instead just straight up adds 2 additional effects on top of being the best possible stat line for its cost. This alone already makes it absolutely broken. But now let's break it down even further. We'll start with the most known ability of Command and Conquer. If it hits, destroy all cards in their arsenal. Now again, we'll relay this card destruction to an actual value of 3 if it destroys a card in arsenal, meaning CNC is potentially 9 points of value if allowed to hit. Now add in the fact that it says all cards in arsenal, meaning rangers that run New Horizon have to suffer even more due to potentially having 2 cards in arsenal, making CNC a potential 12 points of value if allowed to hit, which is just ridiculous. But then wait, there's more. Command and Conquer, on top of already being a 9 to 12 point value attack, defense reactions also can't be played on Command and Conquer's chain link, meaning defense reaction cards such as the previously mentioned Sink Below aren't even allowed to help nullify the insane value CNC is able to provide. So now that we've found out Command and Conquer is too powerful to let hit and we're unable to use defense reactions on it, I guess we'll just have to block it out. But this is where CNC's 6 power shows up, since like stated before, 3 is the highest block value a non-reaction card is able to have. This means it will take 2 cards minimum to block out a Command and Conquer, making this card at worst a forced 2 cards from the opponent. And on top of that, 6 power is also relevant into matchups such as Illusionist due to mechanics like Phantasm. And then on top of all of that, this card is still a 3 block, simply making this card unmatched in any way you choose to play it. Aggro, mid-range, control decks, everyone should run any amount of Command and Conquers because of these reasons. And for all these reasons, that's why we had it landed in at number 6 on this list. And spoiler alert, it's actually our top rated attack action. Now coming in at number 5 is Art of War. Art of War is a yellow 1-cost generic instant with the ability choose 2. Attack actions you control gain +1 attack and +1 defense this turn. The next attack action card you play this turn gains go again. Until end of turn, you may defend with attack actions from your arsenal, or you may banish an attack action from your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. Now real quickly, the main modes chosen on this card is usually the banish, draw 2 and attacks gain +1. Now whether you're a veteran or a newer player, I'm pretty sure everyone has been a victim of being absolutely one shot from an Art of War turn. So to break it down, all attacks gaining +1 attack until end of turn, when paired with a hero that is able to make 5 to 6 attack long chains, puts this card into a 1 resource deal 5 to 6 damage, which is already very powerful when compared to regular attacks at that cost. But there are actually some additional underlying effects that this +1 attack effect has, such as turning all your 3 power attacks into 4 power, making them breakpoint attacks to help push on hits, which is showed even more when players use Art of War at instant speed to bait out blocks from the opponent just to push the attack over using the +1 effect. Also, there are various attacks that produce additional attacks to play for that turn, meaning those specific attacks are actually gaining +2 points of value instead of only +1. And that's just to explain one mode on this card. We'll also go over the second most common mode, being the banish and attack action, and then draw 2 cards. This allows Art of War to use its own mode to filter cards in order to find the best attacks possible to pair with itself. Also, certain heroes are able to turn the downside of banish and attack into a massive upside by banishing a card that is actually able to be played from the banish, essentially turning the effect into straight up draw 3 cards. Then, putting those 2 effects together, you find out just how much points of value Art of War is potentially giving you, which rounds up to a whopping 14 points of value for 1 resource, easily blowing out all of the previously mentioned cards out of the water with this value. And this is without even mentioning that Art of War has 2 more effects to choose from. Heroes are also easily able to abuse the next attack action you play this turn gains go again effect, so if the player needs help making a turn out of a clunky hand with no go again attacks, they can do so. And then that's just the offensive power of Art of War. Since this card is an instant, players are also able to use this card to help defend, using the block from arsenal effect alongside either drawing 2 additional cards to be able to block with that turn, or simply giving their cards the +1 effect, since that also buffs the block value for some reason. Now, although these defensive options are nowhere near as valuable as the offensive value this card can bring, it's still a massive upside to even be allowed to have the flexibility to choose these modes if you really need to. So all in all, unparalleled value plus multi-use flexibility is the reason why Art of War landed in at number 5 for us. Next up, coming in at number 4 is Crown of Providence. Crown of Providence is a generic headpiece equipment with Blade Break and 2 block with the effect. When you defend with Crown of Providence, you may put a card from your hand or your arsenal to the bottom of your deck. If you do, draw a card. Now, even though this card is extremely young to the game, only just being released in Uprising, it has already plowed through to show itself as easily the best generic headpiece in the game. Sorry, Ragamuffins. But to explain this, we'll first compare it to the previously agreed upon best generic headpiece, that being Arcanite Skullcap, where Skullcap was simply 3 points of block value along with the really relevant Arcane Barrier 3. But instead, Crown of Providence trades that 1 block and mostly irrelevant AB for what may seem to be an underwhelming effect of just filtering a card from your hand or arsenal when you block with Crown. But when you break down the effect this actually has in a game, you'll find that the simple effect gives the headpiece a unique ability to be used both defensively as well as offensively. This is due to being able to block with the Crown of Providence simply to use the effect to help filter out the worst card in your hand to help boost your offensive turn that turn cycle, all while hiding this information from your opponent, potentially aiding with pitch stacking. Now you may be thinking, oh, that just sounds like Sink Below. Well, yes, but there are some distinct differences in the effect since Crown also allows for your arsenal to be filtered. This slight difference in effect actually makes a world of difference in power, since this now means that Crown players are able to arsenal any card they want due to them being able to filter it anyway. This means they can always play out the most optimal offensive turns possible while they still have a Crown of Providence in play, since if there's an awkward card left over after that turn that you normally wouldn't want to arsenal in fear of the card getting stuck in there, instead you're able to just arsenal it and filter it away using Crown. This effect also directly counters another card that was mentioned on this list, Command and Conquer. Due to it not being a reaction card like Sink Below, we're able to simply put the Crown of Providence as a block on Command and Conquer in order to filter the arsenal card in response to CNC's effect. When you're able to do this with Crown of Providence, you are now gaining 2 points of value from the block on top of +3 value by saving an entire card from the effect of Command and Conquer. Crown of Prov just provided +5 points of value, which is just insane value for a card you have access to at any time during the game and costs nothing to use. So whereas the previously mentioned card, at least you actually had to draw them in order to gain their value, instead Crown of Providence is just there waiting to gain your +5. And that's why we had to put it at number 4. Now next up at number 3, we have the first non-generic card on this list, Crown of Seeds. Crown of Seeds is an earth headpiece equipment with the effect, once per turn instant, you may pay 1 resource. Put a face down card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck, draw a card, and prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to your hero this turn. Now for both the newer players and the non-FAB players, this card may seem very underwhelming as you're actually going card negative to block 1 damage and filter a single card. But for the Flesh and Blood players that have ever versed an Oldhim before, you will know just how crazy banana broken this headpiece is. So real quickly to break down the uses of Crown of Seeds. 1. Cycle your arsenal card into a better playable card. 2. Cycling your arsenal card into a card in hand means you can now essentially block with your arsenal. 3. Cycling your arsenal and drawing a blue card net gains you 2 resources since it only costs 1 to activate, making it a pseudo energy potion, which by the way just missed our list. 4. The arsenal cycling plays around arsenal disruptive cards such as the aforementioned Command and Conquer. 5. Cycling hides your pitch stack from the opponent, naturally giving the Crown of Seeds players an edge in the late game. 6. The damage prevention allows the Crown player to block out breakpoint attacks effortlessly, again like the previously mentioned Snatch. And then 7. The damage prevention can block both arcane and physical damage.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Now, a player having access to any, if not multiple of these options every turn cycle for just 1 resource is absolutely insane. This card is the closest thing there is to being a Planeswalker in Flesh and Blood, except with the upside that there's pretty much 0 viable ways to kill this card due to it being an equipment. And for those simple but powerful reasons, that's why we had to place it at number 3 on our Power 9 list. Now, coming in at number 2 might surprise some people, but it's actually the most iconic card in Flesh and Blood, Fyendal Spring Tunic. Tunic is a generic chest equipment with Blade Break and 1 block, along with the effect. At the start of your turn, if Fyendal Spring Tunic has less than 3 energy counters, you may put an energy counter on it, and instant, remove 3 energy counters from Fyendal Spring Tunic, gain a resource. So Tunic sets the bar on how good your chest piece should be. Tunic's unique ability allows players to gain a free resource every 3 turns, meaning that the longer the game goes, the more value Tunic will provide you, meaning this card's potential value given can literally be infinity. But to put it into a realistic perspective, longer games tend to go for 15 to 20 turns, and in these games, Tunic has created 5 to 7 resources over the course of the game, and now add on top of its 1 block value, and this single equipment has just created somewhere around 8 points of value for free. Just for that reason, you'll most often see at least 1 Tunic in almost every single deck list for any hero, simply because if the game is expected to go long, Tunic is in a league of its own. This piece of equipment is so powerful, many meta decks in the format even build their deck around abusing the Tunic resource every 3 turns. For example, Guardian players looking to play a 3-card hand of CNC plus Pummel off of 1 blue and the Tunic resource, Iceland players wanting to play 2-cost cards from Arsenal and then using the Tunic and the 1 floating in order to use their Waning Moon, or even aggro decks who have access to powerful weapons such as Rosetta or powerful 1-cost attacks, which downside was the cost but is now negated simply for activating a Tunic, turning that single Tunic resource into even more value with the damage it's bringing. Then on top of all of that, due to Tunic being an instant ability, players also have access to use that resource defensively using it on cards like Crown of Seeds, Oasis Respites, or Brothers in Arms, while even having the option to defend with the Tunic at the same time if they don't expect the game to be going much longer, just adding to the potential defensive value Tunic can also bring. Now lastly, to add to the versatility of this 1 resource, many players will often use Tunic to just counter Frostbites from the opponent, since if you have a Frostbite, it now costs 1 to activate Tunic, so by pitching a blue to activate Tunic, you spent 1 resource to gain 1 resource, but now you've removed the Frostbite to continue your turn as normal, solidifying Tunic as a staple card in today's ice meta. Now the reason we placed Tunic at number 2 is because there are some notable downsides, one of which being Tunic doesn't actually do anything until turn 3, and certain matchups can already be decided by then, and in those games, Fyendal Spring Tunic might as well just be an Iron Rot chest. This is what leads most decks to run an extra chest piece along with their Tunic, and this replaceability is actually why we decided that Tunic should come in on number 2 on our Power 9 list. And now without further ado, coming in at number 1, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, is Crackerjacks. Crackerjacks is a generic arms equipment that actually says, I'm kidding.
Pranked, baby! Yeah! Fuck you! You just got pranked!
What really comes in at number 1, we have Stormstriders. Stormstriders is a wizard legs equipment with Arcane Barrier 2, with the effect, instant, and 1 resource, destroy Stormstriders. You may play your next wizard non-attack action card this turn as though it were an instant. Now, we've put Stormstriders at number 1, not only because it's probably the most powerful equipment in the game, but also because it has some quite literal comparisons to Magic the Gathering's Power 9, in the sense that Stormstriders is practically Flesh and Blood's Time Walk. To explain this further, in Magic the Gathering, when a player casts Time Walk after they end their turn, their they're then able to untap, draw an additional card for their turn, and then play out their lands and spells with the opponent most likely unable to interact. This is the same when activating Storm Striders due to two main differences in the game phases of Flesh and Blood. Those two main differences being, one, players draw up to 4 at the end of their turn instead of drawing 1 card at the start of their turn, and then 2, defending is done with cards from your hand in Flesh and Blood instead of cards on the board like Magic. These two slight differences in game phases result in an interesting playline that Wizards have access to with Storm Striders, and that is the Wizard player attacking on their own turn, forcing the opponent to use cards from their hand to defend, only for the Wizard player to then pass the turn over, allowing the Wizard player to draw up to 4 cards, while the opponent doesn't. They then activate their Storm Striders and use the effect to blast the opponent again with another full hand of damage, essentially making it so the Wizard player just played out 2 turns worth of damage against the opponent's 1 hand. But then here's the best part. Not only is the effect on Storm Striders a Time Walk, which would already make us rate it at least number 2 on the list, but Storm Striders also have a passive effect of having Arcane Barrier too. This is like if in Magic, Time Walk just said on it, gain 2 health. Very random to have a beneficial effect alongside this absolutely broken effect, as usually effects this powerful should come with downsides, not upsides. And then if that wasn't enough to prove why Storm Striders should be ranked number 1 on this list, then to add on top of all of that, these boots are also the sole reason that all Wizard heroes have to start on less health than any other class in the game. No other card in Flesh and Blood or even any other TCG has the same game balancing effect that a whole class of heroes are subject to preemptively being nerfed just because of a single card that they have access to, whether they play it or not. So hopefully you guys agree with this list. Tell us in the comments if you do or if you don't, but that's it for the video, and we outie.